Hi, my name is Justo Dieguez. I am the creator and founder of the Keysi method. The difference between the Keysi method and other systems is based on values. Self-defense begins by valuing yourself, valuing who you are, and then you start to value who are the others. Self-defense starts when you believe in yourself, when you really feel who you are, when you are really living in your interior, when you are you. It doesn't begin by wanting to be a person with bigger muscles than the rest, or because you are more than others, or more intelligent. It doesn't even begin because you have different qualities. It begins when you believe in yourself. Keysi is differentiated by a very simple way of working. While the rest of the martial arts are based in the development of the technique as an end in itself, in Keysi we use the technique, of course, but we use it as a means and not as an end. Keysi was born the moment I was born. It's part of me. It's me. I am the creator, and it was born in the mining town, where I am showing you a part of me, repito, because I can't run away from it. And it's the way I feel. Call it luck or misfortune. I have grown up in a very dangerous environment such as mines, both for work and for a way of life. I was born here, I grew up here, and it's the environment, what, from my beginning in martial arts, transmitted me and made me believe or see in a specific way the reality of a situation of real danger. So as to realize that techniques help me to know how to use my body, but they didn't teach me to fight. Fighting is based on intuition, on instinct, not on technicalities. You can be an intellectual, you can be intelligent, but they are two different things. You can be a very technical person. I love any martial art. I've learned a lot of things, and I feel extremely grateful to all the masters who have strived to make possible that martial arts are known to the world. I do my bit. Keysi is my small contribution as I see it, the way I understand the world of self-defense. In our technical baggage, we use external tools. In this case, we are going to work with sticks, and we will show you several options. Well, understanding the weapons in Keysi is one of the most important factors since they are the ones that will indicate us the space, time that exists between that opponent, that weapon, and us, alright? We must keep in mind that a weapon is not defined as a stick, a knife. Weapons are everything. Any object in the space which we are moving can become a weapon both in our favor and in favor of our opponent. What we have to understand is that the space and how to use it. It's there where the weapon dictates the space, time between attacker and defender. Weapons themselves provide us with an understanding much more related to the way in which we must act in a situation in which these tools are around. But we have to keep in mind that a weapon starts being created in our mind. It's not a definite weapon in itself. In this case, we use the stick as a tool, but what is the stick really teaching us? It's teaching us to use it in a confluent way in that space, time in which we are working. We have to see a risk situation as a two-sided coin. It can favor us or it can have the opposite effect and be our worst enemy. Having a weapon in our hands doesn't mean that our opponent can reach it and use it against us. Therefore, what really teaches us to work with weapons is not only to depend on our physical tools, but also to be able to use those other tools in our environment. If you notice, a stick marks a difference between us and the opponent, but at the same time it covers all the distances. Since it teaches us to use this space in provoking the opponent an attitude of confidence in what he is doing. So that we can use this space and enter the distance where we are less vulnerable to the weapon and at the same time favor us in that situation. As we can see here, there comes a moment that is the moment of the provocation, in which we assure our space-time while provoking the adversary's assault in order to create the emptiness that allows us to come to the hand-to-hand distance, our safest real distance, where we feel really strong and from which we can reach our goals. Our objectives are clear. There is a weapon in between. We have to control that weapon and, if possible, make it work to our advantage. We don't always have the option of using an external tool at range. One of the safest things is that during a combat situation in which there are pulls and grabs is to go to the ground, one of the areas of our work on the ground, and we will show you some of the uses of these techniques. One of the Keysi factors that helps us in our work is to understand that in the street, in real situations, rules simply don't work. With technique, we won't achieve our goals. Technique is the bridge that can take us to the target, but it is not the target. We have to think that in a risk situation, the capacity of instinctive response has to prevail over the technique. In this case, we don't understand that the street teaches us that a fight has no positioning. It can be done standing up. It may happen to you on the ground in 1,000 ways, because you stumble, because you fall, or because somebody pushes you. It has no rules. It just happens. Just as instinct is something that happens at a certain moment, it is that will lead us to have a capacity to respond. And what makes that the sense of the fight, what we call loser and prey, changes in 1,000th of a second. That's why we have to understand that a fight on the ground is not a fight based on controls and trapping. You can reach the ground, but from the ground you have to get up right away. Why? Because a fight on the street is not always against one or two opponents. There may be many of them, even those we can't see. So we have to understand that fighting in the ground has to be something so functional, fast, and safe that makes us get out of the situation as soon as possible. In Keysi, we understand that ground fighting is an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time. One advantage is being able to recognize your positioning on the ground, your levers, your body mechanics, and recognizing the advantages that an opponent would have, speaking in sporting terms, to work on the ground. In Keysi, we don't work out the sport. We train to understand and develop those ground fighting skills so as to be on the ground as little as possible. Why? Because if the opponent simply grabs you while you're on the ground, you are already at disadvantage. In a fight on the street, you haven't got the time, the patience, or the ability to manipulate your opponent. We have to understand that our action when we are in the ground must be a very quick response to get out of a dangerous situation that is putting us at complete disadvantage when there are 1, 2, 3 opponents. If there is an opponent that we haven't seen, what does our work teach us? Control of the area. Wherever we are in every moment of life, in every situation, our goal is to destroy immediately that opponent and get out of that situation as soon as possible. Keysi's fundamental weapons and tools are natural weapons and tools. Our hands, our body itself, every part of our body becomes a weapon. Any external part of our body can turn into a weapon. If I am in a situation of danger, how can I do in order to that this column of wood, not my enemy, but I see it as my friend? Instead of being me, the one that will get hurt with the column, I am going to try that is my opponent who gets damage. I'll use a stone, screws, a peak. I'll use whatever thing is around me. I'm going to try to recognize it so as to make that environment become part of my defense team, alright? It is not about the weapon itself, but what you have in your mind. Keysi is creativity, constant creativity. You express yourself with a technique because your body mechanics will make you express what you do with a technique. That's expression. Our main tools are natural tools. It's us. We are the vehicle. It's in your thinking where everything really starts. It's there where the strength of this method lies. It's in how you make the decisions and in the way you take them. And the response goes from your mind to the outer parts that are your tools, your arms, elbows, knees, legs, head, shoulders. Everything becomes a tool. But it goes much further. It's not only on how turning your body into a weapon, but also the whole environment around us. We're not only talking about taking a stick and strike, but also that our mind has to be opened. Our sense of the hearing has to be completely alert. Our sight has to stay vigilant. Our instinct is auditory, visual, tactile. In this video that we have recorded, you will have the opportunity to see the way we work, with a screw or with a knife, independently of the weapon we are using. The important thing is how we use it. How do we turn it into a weapon? Because you can take a knife and leave it there and see that even if you tell it to attack, the knife will not attack. In other words, the weapon is not the knife, it's us. In the next part, we are going to show you the most important areas and interesting parts of Keysi, the closed spaces. We discover that we don't have a possibility of lifting our legs or jumping or running. Our space is completely closed and limited. Our action and reaction must be very explosive. The distance is very short. Above all, we must be very instinctive when we react and control the space, since we don't have the option of escaping. One of the most important bases in Keysi is body mechanics. Body mechanics will teach us to use our tools at any distance. When we talk about short distance, we are talking about fist work, elbow work, or grappling. It depends on how short is the distance we are talking about. But one of the important things that body mechanics teaches us is the use of the space. That space, for instance, a train cabin, is a very small space with many elements around that are also tools that both we and our opponent can use to our own advantage. In this case, what we want to explain here is that the mechanics will solve the space problem in order to be able to explode with our best capabilities of response in such a situation. In Keysi, there are no tools more or less powerful than others. Everything will depend on the distance in which we are moving. But what is true is that there is a section in Keysi that is what really makes the difference, the work and development of the elbows within the shortest distance, which is where we really feel at ease. In this work, we can see how the elbows work, how we use them, not only as a hitting tool, but to break, to open distance, to reach our target and explode with maximum power. All this thanks to our body mechanics workout. When we understand body mechanics, not as an isolated part, as in other sports systems in which only fists are used, or only fists and kicks, all this is very well at a sporting level, at the level of understanding the situation of real combat or a real situation in the street. We must have the risk situation perfectly clear since our life will depend on that. So at the moment to go into action, we have to know how to use the elbows, the knees, and the fist in this distance. In Keysi, we can't say this tool or this part of my body or yes because I raise more my leg or I have more flexibility so I will be more effective when fighting. Quite the opposite. Keysi is structured so that anybody, whether male or female, has the capacity to respond in a situation of risk without necessarily having to show a great flexibility and elasticity, or the aptitude to leap in the air and perform a flying kick. All that, great power. Keysi is not designed for sports but for risk situations, to understand that the street doesn't require extra skills. Here, what we are talking about is having a recognition of ourselves, be aware of our body, our physical fitness that we obtain through our body mechanics, and a study and analysis in all the areas that can be developed in a combat which is primarily fast, effective, and functional.
Y sobre todo que sea rápido, efectivo y funcional.
In the work and development of Keysi, we use focusing to be able to understand the distance and the explosion of the blow. The work of focus is very important to understand the rhythm and the distance, to understand which is the moment or at what moment we have to get in. But where we put a lot of emphasis is in avoiding those endless choreographies or those sequences of 500 blows, grips, knee strikes, thousands of kicks. We work on sequences of 3. Of course, it doesn't mean that we do a sequence of 3. There is no interrelationship with another sequence of 3, and then at the end there are 6 times, although they are really R3 and 3, which is where we are putting our emphasis. Focusing is one of our most important working tools since we can explode with them. We can make the maximum exposure of our techniques, but always taking into account that it's giving us not only a reference point to hit, but the person who is in our focus is the one who is going to maintain a constant rhythm in our work, to which we have to react according to the predisposition or where the focus is being directed. In this case, we are seeing that there is a focus against one person, but we can transfer it directly to 3 or 4 people. And what does this type of work teach us? One very important thing. 3 blows is the maximum that we will be able to reach in a real situation. Could we make 1,000? Of course, but in the end it will end up being just a choreography, an application, an explosion, an immediate capacity of response will not come from making 1,000 blows, but from knowing how to use those sequences, or spaces of 3 strokes at a constant speed and explosion, and making them both the predator, the focus in this case, are capable of maintaining that rhythm, that continuity. And so, we can come to understand the goals in which we are moving. All of the scenarios we create in Keysi are structured to understand these 4 areas: standing or kneeling, sitting or lying down, and of course without overlooking the spaces in which we move in long, short, middle, or very short distances, as well as the recognition of the environment. Knife is one of the most brutal weapons, I know. Anybody can do a bloodbath without having ever trained with a knife. Understanding that the knife is one of the most brutal and bloody weapons with which we can find ourselves at risk educates us to have the capacity of analysis and to understand that space-time in front of a weapon like a knife, so as not to see it like a game, but like something real. In Keysi, we are clear that disarming someone carrying a knife is not impossible. Can it be done? Sure, but in 99% of the cases, it is not achieved. A weapon like a knife has a cutting and stabbing capacity so precise, so short, movements are so fast that the eye can't see them. We better don't play that game. We get to understand that in a situation of risk with a knife, we have to know how to keep the distance if we want to save our life. And as a last resort, in the event that we have to fight against the weapon, all what we can do at that moment is to risk everything and to go to the very end. But we are almost sure to come out with more than one cut. All of our work in Keysi is based on working on several opponents. In this case, we will see a work against 2 opponents, and this makes us keep constant control of our environment and a constant manipulation of these opponents. In Keysi, our favorite job is the development against 2 opponents. Working out with 2 opponents not only educates us to understand the enemy, but also teaches us that the way to make that this enemy becomes our friend. Understanding the environment is a key factor to reach this conclusion. A wall can be our friend or it can be our enemy. Our friend, if we know how to use it to inflict on the opponent a type of damage, a type of control against the wall. It will be our enemy when it is the opponent who does that to us. Of course, if we are working with two opponents, we have to be clear about some factors that are part where our vision is going to have those two opponents within our visualization degree, or where we are going to put those opponents online using what we call the shield. Practically in all Keysi techniques, once you get to the hand-to-hand distance, we use this tool as one of our principles, using the opponent as a shield and make him our friend in this case. He doesn't know, of course, but we are using it to protect us from potential attacks of the other opponent. It's here where we are going to discover that this infinite quantity of blows doesn't exist. Our explosion will be of only 2 or 3 blows at most, and they have to be in a very fast and a very structured way. Our mind has to go ahead of what is happening, and our responsiveness still far more ahead, because we are making that the situation favors us. In this case, our entire environment is going to be an enemy or it is a friend. Well, here's a small sample of what Keysi is. It's the tip of an iceberg. I am sure you enjoyed it, but I'd like to stress that Keysi doesn't sell security. No, nobody can guarantee security. But there is one important thing, something that I consider our goal, and I'm convinced it's what keeps us strong and growing. What we really want to convey are our values. Not only physical, but also ethical values, where we seek to make the person feel mentally and emotionally valued, and that all those people who come to us don't think that they come to learn to fight. Everything we are showing here is a consequence of those values. If you believe in yourself, it doesn't matter whether you are a man or a woman. If you do believe in yourself, the important thing is that in that moment you are you. And so you are already growing. And you're afraid of nothing. And when I talk about being afraid, I don't mean that fear disappears. Fear continues to exist. It's part of our emotions. But you already can recognize it. As you begin to recognize who you are, who your body is, how you think, how your emotional states work, you will not control fear, but you will recognize it, and that will make you feel stronger. It will make you feel who you are. And this self-confidence, this credibility in yourself, not security, as I said before, we don't sell security, is what, wherever you are, will let you know that you are you, and that will make you feel good and calm, and it will let you enjoy the moment.